Okay, so today is 4/28/17. And when particles diffuse, so these are notes, you should be writing them down, I am sorry, but when particles diffuse like that, it doesn't take any energy. No energy is required. So, have you ever heard somebody say something like, oh, that's as easy as falling down? You ever heard that? It's kind of an old farm person expression, I guess. My grandma and grandpa used to say it. My dad would say it occasionally. Oh, yeah, it's about as easy as falling down. Does it take any effort to fall? No, not really. Everybody can do it. I'm really good at it. It's about as hard as rolling a rock down a hill. There's another one my grandpa used to use. Yeah, it's about as hard as rolling a rock down a hill. Does it take any energy to roll a rock down a hill? No. So when we're talking about a cell, we talk about something called the concentration gradient. So when we're talking about cells, we talk about this thing called a concentration gradient. Your cells have to move all kinds of stuff in and out of them. And they move chemicals in and out. They move, a lot of muscle cells move sodium and potassium. This is why people drink Gatorade, because it has those electrolytes in it, which are just sodium and potassium ions. It doesn't take any energy to roll a rock down a hill. As long as you are moving from an area of high concentration to low concentration, you don't need any energy. It doesn't take any energy to move things from an area where they are at high concentration to where they are at low concentration. If you don't have to exert any energy, if your cell doesn't have to exert any energy, doesn't have to work at it, we call that passive transport. No energy needed. It just happens. This is like rolling a rock down a hill. If you let go of the rock just rolls down. It's like magic. There's no energy required from you. If we wanted to move something up a concentration gradient, if we wanted to move it to an area where there was less of it, we would have to use energy. If we wanted to move the rock up the hill. Who here has ever used an air compressor? Okay. I was thinking about this morning because I had to fill an air tank late last night. So it's loud and it's noisy and it takes electric to pump. So when I started off, the air tank was empty. The valve was open. The concentration of air molecules inside the tank and outside the tank were about equal. If I want to push more air molecules into that tank, it's going to require energy. It's going to require electric, and that compressor is going to have to pump them in. Because I am working from an equilibrium position where there's an equal concentration to having a higher concentration of air molecules inside the tank. If I get that higher concentration of air molecules inside the tank and then I just open up the valve, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? They're all going to leak right out because they're going to move from that area of high concentration to low concentration, all on their own, no energy from me. I don't have to do anything to make them leave the tank. Things naturally want to go from high concentration to low concentration. It's easy. It's the path of least resistance. In a cell, that is passive transport. Now, if we want to reverse this process, if I want to move materials up a concentration gradient, I'm going to have to put some energy into it. If you want to carry a rock up a hill, you're going to have to put energy in. If you want to roll it down, it's no problem. Who here has ridden a roller coaster? You know what your first hill is? You're going up a gradient. You're building all the potential energy you're going to have. Do you go up the first hill just by coasting? Oh, heck no, you're towed up it. You can hear it. Chink, 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 chink. And there's a motor working to get you up there. Energy is being expended to do that work, to get you up that hill. That is active. That is a very active process. There is an energy input there. With cells, if you want to pack a bunch of stuff into a cell, just like think about an air tank as a cell. If you want to pack a bunch of air molecules in there, it's going to take energy. So cells do something sometimes, they have to, called active transport, and that requires energy. So the big thing here is just active transport versus passive transport. Now we're going to take, yes sir?
So it can refer to like putting air in the tank?
Well, no, that's an analogy that I'm using. We're talking here about specifically what cells do when they move materials across the membrane against the concentration gradient, up the concentration gradient. But actually the air tank, and I didn't think of it until today because I just happened to fill an air tank last night, it's a pretty good metaphor. You know, you've got this little membrane, the steel tank, that contains something in it. In the case of an air tank, you're just containing air. But, you know, when there's the same concentration inside and outside, nothing's happening. If there's a higher concentration inside, it's going to leak out. If you want to pump air into it, it takes energy. So with a cell, if a cell needs to pack a bunch of stuff in against the concentration gradient, it requires energy. The cell has to actually work at it. That's active transport. Now we're going to take a look at one of the practice test questions that relates to this concept. Okay, diagram shows an incomplete cross-section of a cell membrane. 3 different particles are shown moving across the membrane into or out of the cell. Determine the appropriate transport mechanism for each particle and move the correct membrane segment into each blank box to complete the cross-sectional diagram. Okay, so we say that the cell membrane is just like that little balloon. It's really simple. It's actually got some little doorways in it. And some of those doorways are actually pumps. So some of them just sort of facilitate particular particles. They help particular particles move, but still down the concentration gradient. Some of them are actually capable of making energy. What do you know about ATP? Have you heard anything about ATP ever? Okay, that's my fault. ATP is a molecule that cells manufacture for energy. It's basically gasoline for the cell. So here, what we have, remember I said the cell membrane is just made of phospholipids, plain old phospholipids. So that's just a plain section of cell membrane, nothing special here. Just it can diffuse materials across it. Okay. This next one is a channel. And these channels are set up for specific little doorways that are set up for very specific molecules, very specific particles. So there are sodium channels and potassium channels, oxygen channels. And they still work with no added energy. So it still has to go from high concentration to low concentration. And then we have things that are actually capable of moving things, hey, head up, Ryan, moving things against the concentration gradient. It takes energy, though, remember, to move things up a hill. So let's knock out the first one here. Only one of these things has any energy to move stuff. So this ATP pump would be capable of moving things from an area of what concentration to what? It takes energy. It's active. Low to high. Wait, yes, low to high. Whew, geez Louise Moser. My brain's fried too today, sympathetically fried. So where do we see something moving from an area of low concentration to an area of high concentration? On the end. So this ATP pump would go there because it's the only one that takes energy. Now, you got 2 other things that you can use here. So you've got oxygen and you've got glucose. Boy, this is tough. Oh. Okay, so you've got a sodium pump that's pumping sodium out of the cell from an area of low concentration to high concentration. You have a dedicated channel that's going to move something from outside the cell to inside the cell from an area of high concentration to low concentration. Okay, well, a few things to talk about. Do you know what glucose is? Anybody have somebody, yeah, anybody have a relative who's a diabetic and carries glucose tablets? Critical for type 2 diabetics and type 1 too. Glucose is the simplest sugar your body breaks down, your pasta, your pizza, your apple, your Snickers bar into glucose. But glucose is a fairly large molecule. It's C6H12O6. It can't just go through the wall. Small stuff can just go right straight through the wall. Glucose actually needs a channel to go through. So it needs a door in the cell. It doesn't have to be a door that has any energy to take it someplace, but it's going to have to be a door in the cell. Oxygen? That's easy. Oxygen can go through the wall of that balloon. It can go through holes in a lot of things. Pretty simple. So oxygen would be the thing that would be able to just go straight through the cell wall. Active versus passive, high to low concentration, just going straight through the cell membrane, rather, not cell wall. The cell membrane doesn't take any energy, so you have to go high concentration to low concentration. Unless there's energy, you can't go against that concentration gradient. One concept, hopefully it'll buy you something on the test on Tuesday. So your lab packet is turned in, your chart is turned in, and with your drawings, and your vocab is turned in. Yes, yes, and yes. Then go have a good weekend.